Mom's trying to record a podcast.
I'm busy right now. I can't give you emotional labor.
Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Literary Liberation. Today we'll be discussing a book that both of us have only heard about through TikTok, Masters of Death by Olive B. Blake. I think that's how you say your name. We just launched our Patreon, so you can find us on patreon.com/literary liberation podcast for unedited versions of the podcast. You can find more literary liberation content on TikTok and Instagram at literary liberation and on Twitter at litlibpodcast. I'm Kristen, and you can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms.
And I'm Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms as well.
Oh, before we get too into this, we also need to mention me and Mariah will be on a podcast coming out this October 25th. We will be on Left of the Projector for The People Under the Stairs, since this will go out on the 19th. That'll be like a couple days before.
First official collaboration with Evan at
Yes.
Left of the Projector. And then Evan's going to be on an episode
With
in
us.
November.
Yes.
For Tender as the Flesh.
Yes, so make sure on this coming, I guess it's going to be a Tuesday, check out the Left of the Projector if you want to hear more of me and Mariah talking about things, especially other than books. But I do think we ended up talking about books somewhat.
We gave a really solid Marxist analysis for that movie.
The People Under the Stairs is the movie.
Very great critique of landlordism and just understanding the political climate of the time that it was posted and just talking more broadly about Wes Craven's movies a little bit. It was good. It was a good fun time.
It was fun. It's definitely very interesting to do a podcast to like a third person with us, because like sometimes like we have our silences and then Evan is just there to fill it. So but yes, so that is our official collaboration with Left of the Projector, and then in November we will have Left of the Projector on our podcast. So make sure this Tuesday, October 25th, you are listening to The People Under the Stairs. The end. Hey.
Period.
Let's get into it. Let's get right into the news. Not like Keemstar's thing. So, The Masters of Death is about a real estate agent. The only real estate agent is a vampire, and the house she has to sell is haunted, and the ghost haunting the house has been murdered. She has no idea how he died. The book is also about a medium, and through this particular medium is definitely a shameless fraud. He isn't entirely without his uses, seeing as he's actually the godson of death. When Viola Merrick seeks out Fox Demora to help her ghost-infested mansion, he becomes inextricably involved with a quest that neither he nor V expects or wants. But with the help of an unruly poltergeist, a demonic personal trainer, a sharp-voiced angel, and a love-stricken reaper, and a few high-functioning creatures, V and Fox soon discover the difference between serious lost love and an annoying dead body isn't nearly as distinct as they thought. This is from her website about.
That's much better than the Goodreads one. All right, so
let's get right into it.
Author.
Olive Blake.
So Olive Blake,
which is a pen
I think
name.
she's in her 30s.
She's younger.
Is she younger than that?
No, I just
32.
meant like she was younger in general, like not old.
Okay. Her legal name is Alexine Farrell Fulmuth, and she goes by Olive Blake. She used to post anonymous fan fiction by that pen name, and then it looks like she just adopted it and has just owned it, which is kind of
some
cool.
of her novels are still published under her real name. I think her young adult novels are published under her real name still, and then official like adult like some of them are published under her real name. I don't understand like what specifically makes it. I just know some of them are published under that.
She is most known for her book Atlas 6.
It's a series.
It is?
Yeah, there's the 3rd book is coming out January.
The politics of Olive Blake is really interesting. She has not made like a firm stance on being like a socialist or a leftist.
She stated she was progressive, I'm pretty sure. And she said she's on the left, which
she also has.
It's a very broad.
Yeah, she has Tumblr posts from 2020, and she talks about imperialism and the economic system that we live under, and how this false dichotomy of the two-party systems that in the United States we live under. Very interesting what she says, and also with the content of Masters of Death, it does lead me to believe that maybe she's like a social democrat or a democratic socialist.
We don't know
I'm
her
still not sure.
specific ideologies on like socialism as a transitionary state or communism, or even what she has said about specifically communism. And I'm not sure if that's just because like her books are very popular, and especially them being very popular in like a capitalist society like this, if you go start condemning capitalism without having like the background of already doing that, I feel like that can negatively affect your maybe book sales or like chances of getting a publishing author or publishing.
You wrote a proper review, or no? Just a couple sentences.
Just a little something, you know. Well, I can go first since you don't have a proper review. This is just basically what I wrote on Goodreads. So, I gave Masters of Death a 5-star. Anybody knowing me, I do not give out 5 stars. Very often. It's technically my 4th 5-star read of the year, because I did read Coraline this year, so that's a 5-star read, but I don't really count that because, like, I read it before and, like, I knew it was going to be a 5-star, but, like, so technically it's, like, my 3rd 5-star read of the year, which, anybody that knows me, my first 2 5-star reads of this year were the King of Scars duology, which are, like, amazing. They're so good. I could rave about those all day. But then Masters of Death is actually, I don't think I liked it more than Rule of Wolves or King of Scars, but it's definitely very much up there, especially for Book-Tok books. Anything Book-Tok related is usually, I usually say the best they usually get is about 4 stars. Like, they're never anything amazing. But I thought this was, like, a beautiful book. It's really oddly written, but I think once you get into it, you kind of get over, like, how it's kind of written. Because some of, like, the chapters are kind of written in, like, second-person point of view, which is not something that I think is very much in fiction books at all. But I thought it was, like, a beautiful story talking about how, like, humanity is and life, and about how, like, good it can be because it is so limited, basically. Which, like, you kind of don't get that, I guess, from, like, the summary of that. It's kind of, like, existential in a way.
I agree. I also rated it very highly. I think it's about a 4.5 star in my books. I did like the diversity of the characters, the multiple point of views. I thought the writing, I know some people critique Olivia Blake's writing, but I thought it was quite whimsical. It painted a really good picture with having it written the way it was. I liked her vocabulary overall. There's a lot of banter, which if you're not into that, maybe be warned by it, but it's not unbearable in my opinion. I do like what is it, like a multi-religious aspect to it, which was fun. I like there's queer characters.
Yes.
It was a good time. It really does. It did something that I have never like consumed in a book. Never had this kind of experience with a read, and I think that's why I rate it so high, because it's so different.
It is
from
very
any
unique.
book that I have read.
Yeah, but I do think that like if you've like read 6 of Crows and you like 6 of Crows, I do think this is kind of like in that same like sort of like found family like era with like since there's so many different characters, there's like a good like 6 of them or something that are like kind of like the main group, and they all kind of like. But, like, anybody that's a part of, like, the found family trope, I think it is very similar. You've read 6 of Crows as well. We haven't really discussed it on here. But, like, I think with, like, the 6 of Crows banter and stuff like that, where 6 of Crows has, like, their pairings in, like, a way with, like, Matthias and Nina, and then you have Inej and Kaz, and then you have Wylan and Jesper. Like, they're all kind of, like, grouped up. Kind of like how this is as well. Like, I think it definitely it's like remnants of like how 6 of Crows is. If you like that like familial dynamic that like characters have, and it definitely, I think it is a mostly focused like character based story. If you like that, then this book is at least like worth reading, I think.
And the characters are flawed in a very relatable way.
very
and I
natural.
appreciate that they don't completely overcome those flaws in the same way that like Leah Bardot writes like Six of Crows or Shadow and Bone. Like you know, like the characters aren't perfect protagonists. They have serious character flaws, but they work through those things, but it's not completely resolved in the end, so it leaves it more realistic. It's I don't know,
Well,
like you feel satiated at the end of
I
reading
think
it.
with
You're like,
it kind
okay.
of being more like because like this book is fantastical, but it's also very much set in like reality as well. Like at least like where like Six of Crows, not to compare it too much to Six of Crows or even talk about Six of Crows too much. I do think like with Six of Crows being in like a different world from our own majority of the time, and like characters that have never lived in worlds from our own, so Masters of Death is able to be more relatable in that way.
It's more along the lines of like a Crescent City type modern day technology and whatnot, but also the fantasy. I don't know what that's considered.
Yeah, like modern
it's
fantasy.
like the, but not like the Zootopia aspect.
No, it's not like Zootopia where like there's like different creatures and like some of the main characters. One of them is like a vampire, Aswang, because he's from the Philippines and like he got turned into like this vampire in the Philippines. And then like there's demons and there's angels and there's reapers and demigods, like from the Norse mythology, demigods specifically. And I think it's definitely, since it's like so like fantastical in that way, and it is like kind of like pulling from so many different like mythologies in different ways, it's interesting then compared to like Six of Crows or something where they just have like their kind of like one magic system. And then I can see how it is kind of like Crescent City in a way, but I feel like Masters of Death does it better because it's not like focused on like, I pulled out my cell phone and FaceTimed blah blah blah. You know?
Yeah.
And I do think that's one of my like biggest, especially like the first time reading Crescent City, that was like my first like modern fantasy I read. This is like a slap in the face. Like you get beat down with like, we went clubbing and did drugs, and you're like, what?
It's a very big change from like the high fantasy, even though I think this is still considered like relatively, like Crescent City is considered quite high fantasy.
I don't know if this would be considered high fantasy because I don't think it's very.
I don't think so.
I think maybe if it was more of like a series or something, like if there's more like world building and stuff like that, because I mean they're in Chicago, like
I
Chicago,
think that's
Illinois.
why people would like this too. Is not everyone is allured to that big world building where you're spending the first 50 to 100 pages just learning the dynamics and the layout of the
like,
world you're going
government.
to be immersed in.
Yeah,
it kind of just gets straight into it.
Definitely,
it's not important.
It's about the characters. Like you live in, like, more than likely you live in like a big city, or you've been around a big city where you're able to understand like the basic dynamics of like a woman trying to sell a house, or like, even though like Fox, he's the main character, even though he's like a medium, it's not like it's like so fantastical. It's just like how you have like palm readers nowadays, or like people that work at like different like sort of like tarot readings and stuff like that. That's kind of like Fox's job, where it's not like anything that's like where he works in a dusty old tavern hiding in the corner talking to ghosts. And he doesn't even like, wait, so like it kind of follows.
Are we gonna get into the spoilers?
Not like
Is
super
this the spoiler zone?
I was just saying, like, specifically, like, if you're somebody who hasn't read this or hasn't heard about it, you should check it out, especially because it follows Fox and V are kind of like the two like different sides of like the main characters. Their kind of groups are kind of what ends up combining Fox with Cal and Mayra and Brant. They kind of end up combining with Tom and V and Isis, own group, sort of beforehand. But it doesn't, this one thing of, it's kind of confusing. The book does not follow a linear timeline. It jumps back and forth quite a bit, where like you'll be reading like one scene and then it'll have like a page break, and then it'll be like something that happened hundreds of years ago, or like a few days ago, or like something like that. Like it's not very linear timeline, so if that's something that you're kind of like is somebody's into, where like you have to have like this happened and then this happened and this happened, I don't think Masters of Death would be a good read for you. It's definitely a little confusing at first too, because it kind of does jump around a lot, especially with so many characters. But I do think like the overall arching story is so nice that you can overcome it. It kind of just follows like Fox Gamora, who is Death's godson, and he kind of has to like team up with V because she is a real estate agent that's trying to sell a house, and it's haunted by Thomas Edward Parker IV. And I think if any of that sounds interesting to you, you really should check it out. Like if you're into like Six of Crows or anything like that, any type of like, I feel like SJM readers could be into this. Like anybody that reads anything
fantasy. If you just
fantasy,
want something, just a standalone book to swap it up and maybe to pull at your heartstrings.
yes,
it's a really good option.
Yeah,
you're in a book slump, pick this up.
Yeah, well, because I read this in September. I read it in August. I think September. That was like my best book month. I read 6 books. It's a lot for me. I know that's like change for you, but it was a good month for me. During this month, I've only finished 1 book, and it was trash. But that's spoilers for another episode. But anyways, so we can move on specifically to spoilers for Masters of Death to truly dissect and talk about the character and maybe some of their quotes and things like that, because actually there's a lot of like pretty like left-wing politically quotes where it's like one quote, I think this might be my favorite quote in the whole book, which is like with these like random characters that are not even like relevant at all. Like they're not relevant to the story, but like B is like new to like the supernatural world, and so she's sort of learning how to like navigate her way through this, and she ends up joining like a supernatural support group sort of thing. And so some of the characters are from that. And like one of my favorite parts is like whenever they have to go, because we're in the spoilers, so like whenever they have to go to Death's tables, like Raphael and the other Archangel Gabriel go up to wherever Fox is, and they're like, hey bro, you gotta go save your godfather, like his Death has been kidnapped. And they're like, well, if I'm gonna go, then like everybody like in my group has gotta go. Like we're all going to this whole like to save Death. I can't just go by myself sort of thing. And so they're like, well, we need.
I think it's important to talk about like the game, because like the game is a center focus where they talk around it, and you don't know anything about this game until the end.
I feel like
all you are told so many times, like the only rule, because there's no rules except one, and it's don't lose.
Yes,
and you're being hinted and thrown bones the whole time about like this game and how all these people have either gained or lost something.
But they're
from
not
this
people.
game.
No humans are allowed to play. Only
creatures, right?
Only creatures,
but also, like how that's
anything that like that's
immortality.
Yeah, anybody that's like immortal. So like all of the gods, there's like references to Greek gods, Norse gods, like anytime. I mean, the real God is like represented like Jesus H. Christ, like all of them are even represented where like, you know.
I didn't know his middle name was H.
You never heard that? Like, goddamn, but not as bad, I guess. But like with these tables and stuff, basically all that it's like mentioned is that like anybody who's like immortal or like has like significant powers, they go to play this game. And you don't know why. But most of the time, the thing is that they play Death. So, like, Death is, like, the owner of these tables. And most of the time, they lose or they tie with Death. You can't beat Death in this game. There's no way to beat him. You either tie or you lose. And the people that, and, like, the things that participate in this game, the things that they lose are usually pretty, like, detrimental things. Because, like, the only way that you can do it is if you have, like, a high bargaining chip, basically. Right? You agree? To lose,
wait,
like,
say that again?
Like the only
to lose the game, like you have to be.
But the only way they can play the game is that you have to have like something high to bargain with, basically. Like, I feel like Death is
I
very...
thought they just let any, like, Joe Schmo play.
I didn't think so. They were, like, very picky because, like, he didn't want to let Brant play or, like, anything like that. Which Brant is a demigod. That's, like, one of the main characters within it. But anyways, they're, like, Death is kidnapped, and so the tables apparently haven't been ran in, like, a while, according to some of the people. But they're like, hey, you have to go find Death, and the only way you can find Death is if you, a human, plays the game. Foxnamore is 100% human, though he's been living for hundreds of years because his godfather is Death, and I guess Death just didn't have the heart to kill him. Or no,
that's like what we're
I think he's given the
find out
yes, he's given the
watch.
Yes,
from Father Time or whatever
that Brant stole to give to Fox because he was so selfish. He could not give Fox up until he did give Fox up. But anyways, what I was just saying, one of my favorite quotes is like whenever... So they're trying to figure out how to get Thomas Edward Parker IV. Tom Parker. They're trying to get him out of the house because they're trying to go figure out how to get to these games and stuff like that. But with Tom's whole story, he was murdered in, like... He says he doesn't live there, or does he live there? In, like, the Parker Mansion. It's, like, this big...
I don't think he lives in it. He lives somewhere adjacent. I think it's important
it's like a museum.
Thomas Parker IV is a Nepo baby.
Millionaire.
He is a product of generational wealth for reasons that you find out later in the book, but he gets killed in that mansion.
He gets murdered. And yeah. We're trying to... Well, because, like... The whole thing with ghosts, you like you die, you have unfinished business, that's why you're haunting the space or whatever. And according to Tom, he has no unfinished business. And so their like next best thing is like, all right, we find out who murdered you, then you're off to see the wizard, whatever it is. We're done with you. But anyway, so then they figure out how to let Tom freely roam without being like stuck in the house is because there's like some clause in like one of the contracts that like his great grandma made or whatever whenever they first made the Parker Mansion, is that someone has to be living in the house like at all times. Like it's not like it's never to be turned into a museum, never to be turned into a shopping mall. Like this clause is that someone has to be living in this house, and because of this clause, because nobody owns the house, Tom is stuck there until someone moves into that house. So I guess his grandparents, like, and there's you end up finding out that, like, there's, like, a Parker curse where, like, all of his, like, elder male familial members have, like, died prematurely. But I think maybe all of them have been murdered specifically. I don't know. I don't know if they've all been murdered. I don't know if that's, like, their thing. I just know there's, like, a curse with it. But, anyways, the quote is that, they figure out how they can get Tom out of there is if they sell the house to someone and someone moves in. So, people that are from these, like, support group come over and they're like, oh, we'll buy the house. Like, we don't have that much money, but we'll buy it so that you guys can take Tom with you and we'll, like, house sit or whatever. We'll be living here for, like, the weekend while you guys are gone. And they're like, okay, well, how much do you have? And then they're like, yeah, and then this is like the official quote. And he's like, I had $10, $7 now, Sly said, holding up a Diet Coke. I bought a pop on the way here. Louisa, gaping. For $3? That's thievery. Sly, taking a languid sip. Capitalism, the worst of all mortal inventions. Brant, to no one and to no one's notice. Not sure Greed would agree. Which I think...
It's just funny because there's a lot of little jabs at capitalism throughout the entire book, and they're funny, and if you're class conscious or have any sort of like understanding of like anti-capitalist ideology or why that's bad, like it's fun. It's just like a good little like
haha, so silly
Easter egg. Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily like play into the overall like storyline.
Yeah. That's the thing is that I think, and I want to say that's something that, like, I can appreciate so much about this story is that, like, in most books, and especially, like, Book-Tok books, you read them, and they're so, like, anti-political, and I don't mean that as, like, they're, like, conservative or liberal. They just, like, actively, like, avoid mentioning Mom's trying to record a podcast.
I'm busy right now. I can't give you emotional labor. You're right, though, about a lot of Book-Tok, just like mainstream
I think
novels
mainstream
that
in
get
general,
very popular. They are very apolitical intentionally.
Yeah.
And that frustrates me a lot when I'm reading through them because
there'd be like
in the
certain
end,
situations that happen where it's like if you just like mention like something about it, then like you could sort of like see where like things were like happening. Do you know, like I can't think of any specific examples. I guess some kind of like Crescent City I think could be another example, not to like compare them in ways, but like Crescent City like critiques like authority in certain ways, but then they also don't like acknowledge the fact in like other ways.
Yeah, that's a resounding theme throughout the whole like SJM verse is this critique of the class-based system that they live under, whether it is like feudalism or mercantilism, whichever
they don't say
series you're reading
yeah.
through. But they make mention of the fact that there is a class-based system, there is a ruling class and a subordinating class. But then the solution is very kind of centrist or up in the air, where it falls back on like, fulfilling the king's chair will bring you back, like in Lord of the Rings. It's a very like Victorian or Edwardian trope that was super popular, and I get why it's in a lot of high fantasy, but reading a lot of that nowadays, I feel like we could do more.
Yeah, especially now with like our current political climate, I feel like there is no way you can avoid politics. I mean, it's all over social media, it's all over the news, it's all over everything. Like anything you.
That's why this book was such a breath of fresh air compared to what we read. I've read a lot of shit off of Book-Tok, and this was the first one that I was like, oh my god, yes, finally something.
Well, even to like reference like The Perfect Marriage and stuff like that, like it talks about specifically like the corruption and like the police and stuff like that, but then it doesn't like scoop into it at all. It's like all very surface level, and it's not like I think this book is like doing a great critique on like capitalism or anything, but it making like it's so like casual can make it very entertaining to read, I think. Where you're
it doesn't feel
but this
like
like,
fan servicey.
Yeah, like this
like,
doesn't.
It's not just like super random, but it is relevant in some instances where I find it enjoyable.
Because like at least like with the overarching story and stuff, I don't think the overarching story with like Fox going to play the tables and stuff is very like political in any sense and stuff like that. What made us decide to do this is just because there are like a few like little like jabs and stuff to like capitalism and things like that, where we have a few other quotes where it's like specifically talking it kind of like in a more like general sense as like maybe like your average fantasy would, but it does get more specific comparatively to other books.
But you can tell that these are conversations between creatures that hold progressive values.
Yes.
Did you hear the spooky music?
No. I don't hear it.
I'm gonna pretend like he's not playing it. Yeah, all of these creatures have very progressive values, and you can see it with
except for
jobs,
Tom Parker.
Except for Tom Parker,
which
who
is
I think is more of a centrist.
Yes,
but
there's
jobs
like,
about Reaganomics and the NRA and what else? The fortunes off the backs of an unlivable minimum wage, kind of shitting on billionaires and mega churches, which was super interesting to see in a book.
Yeah,
but she does at the very end of this book, and I don't know if you caught it as well, when she's V is talking to Tom Parker, like they've gotten through the games and whatnot, and I can't remember who it is. I think it's
about him, like
Myra or somebody's talking about the ledgers and how Tom was never really a Republican.
Oh yeah.
He was something else, and that he's not really a billionaire. He's a millionaire because of his
he donated so much
philanthropy work, like, and that therefore like raises his.
Where he was more likely to go to like heaven or whatever, the afterlife, like the positive afterlife, than because.
But if you know anything about charity work. You know, it's an industry within itself, and it's not meant to do anything to solve poverty. A lot of times there's all of these loopholes and
it ends up
hoops
being
you have to
more
jump through to get
beneficial
it.
for the rich person anyways within tax write-offs and things like that.
And why is there like CEOs and like a board at these charities? Like, it's not a
they're not doing it out of the
organization.
goodness of their heart in general, which I don't
very passionately, because it's not mutual aid. Mutual aid is going to do more than these like philanthropic work.
But I don't
whatever, however you say it. You know what I mean?
Philanthropic.
It's hard as a mouthful.
But I'm just not sure. I don't know like how well educated either Olivia Blake is on like that specifically, like within like mutual aid and stuff like that, because like you can tell a lot, at least in this book, like a lot of her quotes are very like surface level, where she talks about like eat the rich and stuff like that, which is like things that like it's very much giving like leftist vibes, and I'm using leftist as derogatory, not in a positive way.
Do you remember like the Bernie girl that got really popular?
Oh, Nico Lols?
Is that who
okay,
she was
Boomer?
With the blue shirt?
Yeah.
Yes, the OK Boomer.
Yeah, that's Nico Lols.
The
Kami-chan. She changed her name on TikTok. So
that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to get into that.
I don't know. Like, it definitely, like, some of
it's doing lip service.
Yes.
And sell it. And I do worry that that's what
this is.
Because it's like, it's not bad. I enjoy it. I don't think it's like over the top.
I think with it being so casual, it doesn't come across that way. But then I do agree, like, with the ending with, like, philanthropy. It's like, well, if all the billionaires just gave their money away, then we wouldn't have this problem. Like,
I didn't like the fact that V ended up with Tom.
Yeah, that was
like, she was a working class woman.
Yeah,
for the most part. Like, she was just a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Marrying a billionaire, or like ending up with a millionaire.
But then
so icky.
he's
Nepo
not
baby.
a billionaire anymore, though, because in his new life, since he died officially, and he, like, spoilers, obviously, for the end of the book, but he comes back as, like, a human again, so he has to change his name. So he doesn't have that wealth anymore at the end. So, I mean, really, the rich died. I mean, what more could you ask for?
I was thinking about that, too. Like, his whole, like, the resolution to him. And, I mean, who knows where his money ends up going after that.
Because
like,
he didn't have any kids or anything. And I don't know if they can, like, make it so that he has access to that because he's not alive anymore or anything. Or, like, unless he's gonna be like, oh, I claim to be long-lost brother or something. They don't really resolve that in the end. I don't know, like, we need, like, an epilogue where it's, like, whether or not he became working class.
What happened to the Parker family fortune?
Yeah. But, yeah, I do think with, like, casual mention of it, I think is a good start, at least, for, like, anybody who is, like, into socialism and stuff like that. Because, like, I think that's one thing, too, that kind of is, like, a stereotype for, like, communists and socialists, that they can't enjoy, like, things that happen within capitalism, like reading books or, like, going to Disney World or something like that. Like, you can still do that. You just have to critically analyze, like, what puts you in the position to be able to go on, like, these nice trips and things like that, and, like, critically understand. Because nobody's, like, being like, you can't go on vacation, you can't do fun things if you're a socialist, because we live under capitalism. And I think that's something that kind of gets, like, pushed under the rug, I guess. Or it's like, you can't do fun things if you're...
I do notice that there is this expectation amongst a lot of, like, comrades. I don't know if it's...
I think it's
the
more
ones
like...
that are a little antisocial, where they're like, you need to be, like, dying for the cause every day, which I understand a lot, but I don't think everyone is able to do that.
Yeah.
Like, people have kids. People have families they have to take care of, so it's like, what about them? Like,
yeah.
There's got to be ways that they can do praxis.
And then also...
without, I don't know. We only have one life, too, so it's like, how do we find that balance?
I do think that's something that's, like... Well, because, like, you want to be able to go, like, on, like, whether it's, like, traveling to, like, Europe or something to go, like, probably the fine wines in Italy or something like that, or it's going to Disney World or taking a beach vacation or something like that, where I feel like, and I think it's definitely more of like a very much like online people that don't go touch grass situation, where they're like, that money could have been spent towards like mutual aid, or like where you're funding some type of like, I don't know, anything that's like not specifically for fun. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, a lot of people just have like that miscommunication where it's like, it'd be one thing if people were going to Hawaii or something like where we've been told not to do that. Like listening, I feel like there's a way to do it without compromising your values. So that's kind of the trick. Like maybe if you have the money to buy a house, like everyone should be able to own their own home. That's not like antithetical to what we stand for, but maybe don't buy a gaudy house.
Yeah, like you don't, if you're two people living in a house, you don't need like a 7-bedroom home, you know? Like that's like one thing where it's like criticized. And I actually do think this story kind of like goes into like accepting the positives and negatives of people, speaking about Brant specifically, because he's kind of a shithead like throughout
the whole book,
majority of the book, until like the last like 50 pages, and you're like, oh, because like his whole storyline honestly is kind of confusing, because he's a demigod but he's immortal in Norse mythology. Well, I'm not very well versed in Norse mythology, but I know like at least all of the gods are not immortal. That's why they have those apples that they eat. They eat like from the tree of life, where they're supposed to sustain the gods until Valhalla, which is like the big war that like Vikings fight in, which is like, what a terrible afterlife. Like your idea,
perpetual war.
It's like
a big feast.
It's not perpetual. It's like a big war that's supposed to be like between like the gods and like whatever, where like it destroys all of humanity and stuff like that, and that's what they like live for, is to like go die and to be in war. And then like it's like a really like, and that's like what the gods are like preparing for, is like Valhalla. And like I don't know like what happens after that, or like if the Viking dies in like Valhalla, but I just know it's like really weird. Like it's like, but Brant specifically, like he wants immortality. He's very much afraid of death. Not afraid of death as like the character. Death is like dying,
ceasing to being.
Yes,
an end. Yes, to existing.
And so he basically, there's in Norse mythology, I don't recall her name, I don't know if you remember her name, the lady that protects the tree of life, or like I don't know if she like protects it, or like
Iodin, but it had like the O with the cross through it.
Oh, I don't know.
Right?
I don't know. But this woman that he kind of like, I don't know what to describe what he does for her. He's like her little servant boy, where he
brings her the world. Like that's his purpose. His job for her is to bring her the world. So it starts with him talking about stories that happen on the earth, being like a messenger of sorts, and then bringing experience, like physical experience, to her by like via pleasure.
Yes.
And then it becomes more where he talks about like his emotions and is able to like articulate what he's feeling throughout everything that happens. So he keeps a ledger or a journal with him at all times, so that he can bring this to her in exchange for the apples that sustain his immortal existence. Yes. Because he's doing it so that at one point in time, he wants selfishly to be with Fox.
Yes.
By any means possible. And he's working every angle he can, because he makes a big mistake when he's
you can
gambling.
Talk about it.
I guess, yeah. It was like
we're in the spoiler zone.
We're in the spoiler zone. He goes to the tables for a second time, and
after he went there, because he went there once.
Because he went there the first time and lost his truths, because he had nothing to lose but his truths. So he can only talk around things.
I'm pretty sure he stole the watch then too.
Yeah, and then he goes back again to try to win, and he loses. and then he can't see Fox
anymore. That's what
anymore.
Because Death, as a character, does not like Brant at all. He thinks he's annoying. He's full of himself, which is very much true. He is exactly right. And Death is very protective of Fox as well, where he's very much like, he doesn't think anybody would be good enough for Fox in any way, shape, or form. Like, he very much holds Fox up on his pedestal because this is Death's, like, one and only child. Like, he's raised Fox from his birth, which is, like, at the beginning of the book, that's kind of like the intro into Death and Fox's character, where he's raised Fox since he was a baby, and he loves Fox so much that he even changed, like, how he looks and made himself look human to raise Fox, because he loved him as a child so much, and he loves him now so much.
But he doesn't know what love is because he's a mortal being, so in trying to protect Fox, he ends up
going too far. Yes, because he doesn't understand that, like, relationship love in a way, and I think that's one thing, because, like, I do think he very clearly loves Fox, even though he doesn't understand, like, that emotion that he feels, that is something very clearly he is feeling for Fox. And so with that, he is overprotective of Fox in very many ways, where he's unable to truly, I guess he tries to protect him from Brant, and so that's why whenever Brant comes to the table for the second time, because I think originally Brant wanted, like, full and unconditional support from Death for the relationship, where he was not able, that's what he was gambling, where he thought he could win, where he could have, like, Fox all the ways that he wanted him to be, like, a true, like, unit with him, because I guess that's something that, like, to have, like, your parental blessing within, like, a relationship. And so, but then he loses that, and then Fox ends up ends up hating him because of that. But then they all get resolved in the end, and they all have a happily ever after. They become boyfriends again in the end.
It's a hard book to talk about because of the overall structure of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, because it bounces around, and there's so much that's happening, but at the same time, a lot of it is just dialogue. So, like, when we're talking about this, it's hard to, like, do it in a linear fashion because of how the book is constructed.
It's not linear at all.
And I'm realizing it now as we're trying to, like, discuss it.
Because, like, you have to go, because, like, it'll be, like, present day, and then it'll go into the past. Like, while, like, certain situations are happening. It'll go.
It's about 5 minutes into the past.
Yeah, like, it'll be, like, right before, like, right before Brant showed up. But, like, it'll be like, oh, well, we had this whole conversation. Like, oh, we're having this conversation and Brant shows up. Well, this just happened right before Brant was here. In many ways. And so it is kind of, like, confusing to talk about, but I do think at this point I would hope you read the book, or at least are going to, I guess. I feel like if you're at this point, you might as well, you should read the book, like, if you haven't. But I don't know, I think it's very nice to see too, like, queer romance that isn't, like, inherently, like, sexualized in a way, because I do think, at least with a lot of, like, Book-Tok and sort of, like, that whole, like, Tumblr-esque, like, gay male, like, novelizations, it's always, like, inherently, like, sexual in ways, and, like, written, like, kind of like Red, White, and Royal Blue, or, like, another, you know what I'm saying? Like, those, like, fan fiction-y, like, tropey things, where I think this is something where it's very much, like, it's a love story, but it's also not a love story in many ways.
It's a story about being able to overcome your own demons for like the greater good. Like,
yeah,
that's like the whole premise of the tables, is you're fighting your own demons.
You're, like, fighting yourself and, like, what you believe and what you've seen in your life.
Yeah, and, like, the immortals
they crave that, like, humanity is what they want.
Because they are able to experience it, but they also want to live forever. But in order to live forever, you basically have to sacrifice all of your emotions, because
Because,
Maybe
like,
you don't need them after a certain point.
and that's one thing, too, because, like, one thing, the reason why people love so hard and they love so much is because, like, that person, whether it's the person that they're with or their pet or whatever, that thing is going to die. And you know that time that you have with your family member, your significant other, your pet is so limited. So you always are craving to spend time with them, be with them, do things with them specifically. Where if you were an immortal creature and your partner or whatever, like, you want to do is also immortal, it doesn't mean as much because it's like, well, I always have next week to do it, sort of thing. Or like, we have infinity together, and so it's not as specifically, like, there's no stakes in it. Versus, I think and I think that's one thing too that a lot of, like, people forget as well, and I think this is why this book can be, like, a good reminder of that, is that, like, whenever you have, like, a familial member or a friend or a family member or a pet or a significant, whatever it is, that you enjoy spending time with and stuff like that, you push it off in certain times, and then whenever they die, you always end up regretting it so much. Or like, oh, we didn't do this enough together, or we didn't do this enough together. And the reason why it means so much is because that thing can specifically end. Versus, like,
which is so different than a lot of mainstream fantasy novels where the premise of the book, like Avatar, we always come back to, or Throne of Glass, whatever, is being able to live forever with the love of your life so that the love can continue on. But this kind of played into this a different whole, like, trope or genre. I don't even know how to describe it, where
it talks about
you're more content with just enjoying the little things,
like, understanding
and kind of
that, like,
the moment.
Yeah, like, you know that your time is short, and that's one thing too that I think is really beautiful at the end too, because, like, earlier in the book you find out that, like, Fox is immortal because he has Father Time's watch or whatever, and he wears it all the time so that he doesn't age and he doesn't get older and stuff like that. And Brant selfishly did that because he was selfish in himself, where he didn't want to cease to be. So he was like, I don't want the love of my life to cease to be. And of course, he doesn't tell Fox any of this because he can't. But then also because, like, I feel like even if he could tell Fox, even if he didn't, like, lose his truths, he would have been suspicious about it anyways, just because he's kind of, like that, and, like, the way his character is. But then in the end, Brant gives up, like, getting the apples of life, and, like, Fox doesn't want his watch anymore. Like, they know that, like, how great, like, just having this time on Earth together, being with each other, is worth being, you know? And, like, it's sad, but it's also, like,
it's sweet.
It's,
like,
it's poetic.
I don't know.
It's so, like, heartwarming.
Just, like, pulls at your heart.
Yeah.
Like, oh my fucking god.
I know.
I want this.
You're like, wow, like, having someone that you actually want to, like, choose to spend your limited time with is such, like, a commitment too. And I think that's something that, like, even though they've had hundreds of years together is still so limited compared to, like, an immortal being. And I think even, like, Death himself was selfish in ways, or, like, keeping Fox around whenever he should have died hundreds of years ago. But it's just a very sweet book. And, like, even in the end, you would think that, like, the only people that kind of get, like, their infinity, it's kind of like almost like The Fault in Our Stars. And I think maybe that's why I'm so, like, biased towards this book in a way, just because I think anything that kind of, like, reminds you that, like, hey, you know, your time is limited and you don't have forever, and Mariah's walking around, so it's
changes
distracting.
Your perspective.
I feel like it doesn't change your perspective, because you always know, like, that, like,
it forces you to
it makes you think about
values.
it. Yeah, it makes you realize that, like, yeah, like, because, you know, everyone knows, like, I only have, like, 40, 50 more years left on this earth. I mean, like,
which is super depressing.
It is depressing to
like,
think
it's
about.
not that long.
Yeah, because, like, if I live to be 100, I'm, like, almost a quarter of the way done, and more than likely, we're not going to live to 100, because, especially with late-stage capitalism, Well, I just mean, like, with our current, like, living standards, you know, like, and, like,
you don't think the pollution is gonna help?
Maybe. But, like, especially, like...
I mean, this all assuming, like, the Earth isn't gonna end
in, like,
in
20
that time.
years, yeah. This is assuming that we get to live our full, like, natural lives in ways. But I think that's something that, like, it kind of reminds you to, like, hug your boyfriend more. I guess that's kind of sad to say, but, like, hug your, like, long-term partner, because I do think that's something that happens whenever you are with, like, the same person for so long. That's something you don't think about, like, the doing, like, spending this little bit of time together to, like, watch a movie together or something like that is kind of, like, something that's not something so focused on in, like, relationships, or, like, even, like, because, like, my cat died in July, and it was very sad for me because she was, like, my cat that I've had since I was, like, 4 or 5 years old, and she was,
Is she
like...
not in the background?
She is right here. You can see her right
He's making me assemble a puzzle, so I'm doing the border of it so that he can do the rest. Okay, do the hard
you're
parts.
complaining about this time hanging out with him.
I know, right?
But that's entirely what this book is about.
I know. It is sad though, because like your kids do grow up so fast that like you do regret.
Obviously,
a lot of
like
things. Like even if you spend all the time in the world with them, like they just grow so fast.
But like with Lola, like
I
didn't have any pictures of her from like a kitten. Like the first photos that I have from her, like from like 2013, because like yeah, she was born in like 2004 or something. She's old, and so like by the time that like I had like a camera that I could regularly take photos on, where like I could post them to like with social media and stuff getting big, like she's already a grown woman. She's already almost elderly. So like it was just like really sad to like think about too, because like I just think about like then it like makes me happy, because then I like think about like, oh, like the reason why I was able to cherish like my time with her is because it was so limited. If she just lived forever, I would have taken her for granted anyway, you know. I feel like,
and I feel like as a kid, when you do have like an animal growing up, you kind of do take them for granted. Like I remember having a dog named Roxy the Doxy, she's Doc Sound, or however you say it.
Dachshund?
Weenie dog. Yeah, yes, that's better.
Dachshund?
But
I used to have
she
Dachshunds.
was always around. Dachshunds.
I had Dachshunds. I had 2. One of them died too whenever I was younger. I don't have any pictures of him. Guinness and Bailey.
She died like a couple years ago, and it was just so weird to think like she went through like all the big life moments through me, and I kind of just
pushed it aside.
You take it for granted.
Well, see,
it's like, oh, I'm busy.
Well, like for Lola, like it feels so bad too, because I moved out of my parents' house and I probably could have taken Lola with me. I wish I did, but like Lola was my cat, and then Lola kind of like adopted Emma, but you could tell she did not like Emma as much as she liked me as my cat. And so like it's just really sad to like think about, because like she's a cat, so she didn't have like the understandings of like whenever I moved out, and like she went from seeing me every day for like 15 years to like never seeing me at all. And so then it's very hard too, because like I only got to see her like whenever I went to go visit my parents, which was not as often as I guess it should be. So then I never got to see her as often, and now even like going to my parents now, and like she's not there to like walk up to me as soon as I walk in the door. She would always do that whenever I showed up at my parents. Like she would hear me upstairs and she would come upstairs and sit on my lap or something like that. And so it's just very sad, because like it's sad, but then it's also like I'm so glad I did get to have that. Like I got to have her in my life, even if it was just for 20 years. But
it's like the saddest thing about pets is because you
and even
always
people.
Well, yeah, people too, but pets especially, like you can form such a like big emotional bond with them, but they only live like 15 years, barely, 20 years.
And Lola lived for a long time, like 20 years. Like I think for cats it's like 14 to 16 years is like standard. And I think she was 19 when she died, so that's a good 3 years after like her expiration date, kind of. But like
life is weird.
Yeah. But then the ending of this book, like I think that also like makes me tear up too, like the last like thing where it's like,
is that like where it goes from third person to second person again? Like where it's death talking to the author?
yes. Where it's like, in any case, I have a number of things to do, so I'm going to leave you with this. Try not to take it personally when I see you again. It's bound to happen after all, and I'd like to be able to keep it friendly between us if we can. We're both simply fulfilling our purposes, aren't we? You're immortal and I'm death. It could have never gone any other way. Like, it's so beautiful. It's like making you tear up.
A lot of people don't think, or they try not to think about death. This is what I've noticed. Like when I worked in memory care, you're surrounded by it all the time, especially like the cottages that I took care of. It was like the very, very end stage. So people were dying all the time and you're sitting there with them, and people, the way they react to it is so strange. But when you're with it all the time, you kind of just learn to embrace it and just like, this
Which
is just what it is.
Sad thing to do is to like get used to it. Like, you don't ever want to get used to death.
But it makes it less scary too. Like, I don't think death is all that terrifying of an experience. We all go through it.
I think it's just like, it's something you take it, like, you always think that you have more time too, because I feel like even like older people, like, because like the 70 years that people live in like the United States or whatever it is, like 70 years sounds like a long time until you've probably lived those 70 years, and like now it's like, I'm 24 and I feel like 24 years sounds like a long time. Like, I think about in 24 years from now when I'm 40 something, I'm like, that's a long time from now. But then I'm like, I really don't feel like I've been alive for that long either, though. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Mm-hmm. I did take care of people that were like in their 90s, and they were just like,
yeah.
Oh, it's your birthday. And they're like, well, how old am I now? I'm like, oh, 94. Like, I'm still kicking. Like, yeah,
but that's
sorry.
like such a like,
it ends?
Yeah. Which, I mean, like, I feel like, but once you hit, like, that 70 mark, at least, like, here in the United States, because we don't have, like, very good, like, no offense to you, elder care. I'm sure you're great at your elder care, but, you know, like, we have so much, like, elder abuse and things like that, and we're not such, a, like, a familial unit anymore. Once you get to that age, you're kind of just, like, waiting to die.
It's really sad. Like, it does come down to that.
Yeah. It's very
why
sad.
You should treat the people in your life with kindness and compassion, and you shouldn't push them away.
And spend time with the people that you love.
Reject individualism as a capitalist mindset. Love your community. Make
Except
connections
for
with people
unless you
outside
have
of the nuclear family.
But this is also not something too where it's like, if you have like a familial member that is like verbally abusive to you or negative to you, you don't have to like withstand that
shit.
Yeah,
you don't owe them anything. They can die alone. It's fine. There will be people to take care of them.
It does not have to be you.
Yeah, just know they will be cared for. It doesn't have to be you.
Yeah,
that's why I'm saying, it's like, take care of the people around you now so that they want to be with you through that last leg of your life, and
you don't have to go get taken care of by people like Mariah.
Yeah, otherwise I'll be doing TikTok dances for them.
Do we think we have any other closing thoughts?
I don't think so.
I just think this book is so like thought-provoking and like it's like sad, but it's so lovely. Heartwarming in so many ways that like, and I think it is like overall a good message, because I do think like this is something people never think about, like this stuff. They avoid trying to think about it, and I think like warming up to the idea is like the best thing you can do. So then I think whenever you do lose somebody big in your life, then it's not as painful. Like, it's still painful, but it can be. You can cherish. That's why, like, everyone's always like, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Which is, like, the cheesiest quote, but then it's also like, yeah, you should try to look on the bright side.
Bright side. And, like, don't slave away at a job that doesn't value you, because you're socialized into believing that the meritocracy is, like, the peak thing that you should strive for, but in reality, just human connection is something that is it's priceless.
Yes, that's what you're going to miss. That's what, like, if there is like any type of afterlife, that is what you'll miss, is spending time with the people that you love and the people you care about, or the things you care about, not your stupid capitalistic overlord that's stealing your surplus labor value and exploiting the shit out of you. That does not gonna matter especially once the world is burning or whenever any of this in the futures happen. You're not gonna think about work. You're gonna think about the people in your life that made a positive impact on you. And I think that's what this kind of, like, this whole story, like, talks about. It's like, even, like, you doing the right thing is something that you should strive for, but then also, like, making sure that you have a human connection and doing the right thing overall for the goodness of humanity. With, like, because, like, Fox goes and saves the entire world. That's how, like, the entire thing sums up. He saves all of humanity when he could have just said, fuck it. So I think doing the right thing is kind of like, and doing the right thing is being a communist or socialist, I guess, whatever you want to say.
Objectively.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into some ontological debate on, like, the philosophical, like, the good, the intrinsic good, but I am right. Kristen is right in this.
Do you actually have any nonfiction reads?
In regards to death?
Maybe not. I just mean maybe, like, Mutual Aid. Who's that by?
Dean Spade.
Yeah.
Mutual Aid by Dean Spade.
Which is
or
like
All About Love by Bell Hooks, I think is a good one.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
Because this is kind of about love, and I know
Yeah.
there's some bits in that book that not everyone resonates with. But I think overall, just like human interaction and like learning to love other people and what love can mean and what it ought to be, I think that's a good nonfiction recommendation. I can't think of any other ones off the top of my head.
Yeah. I think Mutual Aid is more like what we were talking about more than it has to do with the book, but
yeah, just my critique of philanthropy work.
Yeah.
Like, or just like philanthropy as like a concept
in general.
to
Yeah.
solving poverty.
Okay. Well, if that's it, make sure you check us out on Patreon, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and don't forget that next week on October 25th, join us on Left of the Projector podcast on October 25th for a Marxist discussion about people under the stairs. Anything else?
No, I don't think so. I apologize for the sound of small child in background, but this is a very real life podcast. This is not.
We don't have a special studio that we can go sit in and abandon.
This is what happens when you're a Marxist and a parent and you like to read books. You gotta make
we
compromises.
Also live on the opposite sides of the country from each other.
That also makes it difficult.
But other than that, thanks for watching or listening, or
whichever,
wherever you get your podcast.
We don't have a sign off.
No, we need to work on. We have an intro. I got the intro down pat. Next episode will be The Duology, The Housemaid, and The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McLadden, something like that. We'll have better research for the next episode on information about this. That's all. Signing off. I'm Kristen, your co-host.
And I'm Mariah, your other co-host.
And we'll see you on October 25th on Left of the Projectors podcast.